Sorry for the misadvertised start. It should have said 6:30 on the website, but it said 6 p.m. So I'm sorry about that. It's good to see quite a lot of people here. By all means, if you want to switch your video on, by all means, please do so. If you don't want to, by all means, please do. If you want to keep it switched off, by all means. So we've got, we're probably starting a little bit earlier than scheduled. So we've got Sheila with us, who spoke to us at Conference last year. And Sheila's going to give us a little bit of an update about what's happened so far with the reviewing housing adaptations, but mostly what Sheila wants from this evening is a bit of discussion, thoughts on what everybody thinks and practitioners' views in terms of what's happening with the review, and thoughts and ideas. Sheila, if there's anything I've missed out. You're on mute. Oh, you're still on mute. Oh, there we go.
No, I'm here now. I'm not really talking very much about the review as such. Yeah. I'm following on from what I talked about in the conference in November, where I did two sessions, one on housing associations and home adaptations, which was a follow-on from the 2018 DFG review. And then I did another session on design. And that generated a lot of discussion in the kind of chat box and things. And really, I'd kind of tried to put too much into that session to give you as much information about everything I'd been doing as possible. And it was sort of generally felt, I think, that we needed to talk a bit more about design. And so that's really what I'm going to be talking about today, is, what do we mean by it? What are we trying to do? How do we fit this in? How does it work? What do we want to see? And how can we help, really? So I'm going to go through that, and I'm really not going to talk for that long, because I want it to be a discussion. I want to get your views on things. So that's really it. I mean, there is going to be guidance coming out as well very soon, but there's going to be lots and lots of information and training webinars on that's coming from foundations. So I'm not really going to talk about that. I haven't been involved in the guidance, although my understanding is a lot of our recommendations in the review are being taken forward in that. But there's still a lot of consultation as well to come on the upper limit of the DFG and the means test, and how the funds are allocated to each local authority, because we know that that's not actually done in a very fair way at the moment. So it needs to be fairer and more transparent. So there will be consultations sometime, I think, this year on those three items: means test, the upper limit, and the allocation. Okay.
That sounds really promising. Has anybody got any questions so far, or anything they want to add or mention? Anybody? It's all really weird because I can just see names on the screen. Anybody?
I've just hopped on.
Oh, hi, Jacqueline.
It's Jack. So I'm very sorry I missed this. So I can't add anything because I don't know what to say. But thank you.
So did you have some slides here, or were you just going to talk around?
Yeah, I'm just wanting to kind of check that we're ready to start. Are you ready for me now? I know that quite a lot of people are coming in probably at 6:30, so
it might be worthwhile leaving it a few more minutes.
So we just leave it for another couple of minutes or so to see if anybody else joins. So I'm afraid I'm going to show some of the slides I showed in November, but I think it's a good reminder of what we were talking about, and I've tried to sort of jazz them up a bit more and add a few extra things in. But it's mainly about discussion.
Can I ask, you mentioned something, sorry, it's Raquel here, but you mentioned something about consultation. What was that about? Or
there's it was announced actually in the social care green paper in December that the funding for the DFG is going to stay pretty much the same, but it's been guaranteed until 2024-25. So it's 570 million, which is basically what it is this year. So there's been no increase for inflation or, to cover increased building costs or anything like that. But at least we have stability so that we know what the amount will be for the next, 3 years, which I think is actually a great thing to have, because, there may be extra pots of money. You know how it is. It appears that sometimes towards the end of the financial year, there's a bit more goes in, but at least the baseline amount is set, and you can plan for that. So it means services can be quite stable.
Thank you.
But there are some other things announced, which was there's going to be some new funding, which is for handy person services. It's for repair and it said repair and adaptation work, but it's I think going to be used for handy person services to get more of those around the country, because at the moment there are some areas that don't have a handy person. And there's a bit more money for supported housing as well, which will help. But not a lot of detail yet.
Okay.
But in amongst the announcements in that white paper was also the fact that there's going to be further consultation on the 3 main issues that we were looking at in the 2018 DFG review, and that is the means test, the upper limit of the DFG that's set at 30,000 and has been since 2008. So, even if it was just for inflation, it would be higher than that now. But we suggested in the DFG review that perhaps it should also take account of regional building costs and the cost of those of getting some professional support for those more expensive cases, so somebody to project manage it. So there's an extra 10% added in to cover some of the costs. But the other thing is the allocation formula, and at the moment that's unfair because it's still in a bizarre way still based on the old bidding system that used to happen before 2011, when local authorities used to have to match fund. They used to have to put 40% of the funding in relative to the government's 60%. And authorities that, were wealthier, I guess, or had more powerful housing renewal people in charge, actually bid for more money than some other authorities. And that is still sitting in the formula, because it's only the new money issued since 2011 that is allocated on a new, fairer formula based on need. So there are some areas, and you may be in a local authority where you're really strapped for cash, but the neighbouring one that's got the same sort of population is actually, able to do away with the means test and deliver discretionary grants. And you're thinking, well, why can't we do that? And it's because the actual allocation formula isn't that fair. It's difficult to come up with a fair formula because we don't have granular data at local level on the number of disabled people, number of older people, and the people who are on low income in each area. It's just not there in sufficient detail. But we can make a stab at it. There's some proxy measures. We've obviously, we may have a figure that might work from the census that's coming out. I don't know. So there are some things that they could base that formula on, but they want to consult on how they should do it. And I've just been doing this work on housing associations, and housing association use across the country is very, very variable. Where an LSVT, where a transfer association got set up with no budget, they take huge amounts of the DFG budget sometimes. And in some areas, the housing associations take 50, even 60% of the DFG budget. So I think housing association use should be taken account of in that formula as well. Otherwise, there are some areas where, private rented tenants and owner occupiers don't really get a look in. It's all going to social housing. So there's a lot of things to discuss in that consultation, but I hope that you'll all, you know, give your views when that gets announced. But when that's coming out, I don't know.
Well, I think we've got about 15 people. Gilles, I don't know, and it's just gone 32 minutes past 6. So I don't know whether it's worth giving it sort of starting, and if anybody does miss anything, the recording will be made available in not the upcoming newsletter, but probably the March newsletter now.
Yeah. Okay. There's a humming sound, and everybody else.
David,
I don't know whether it's your end or sort of feedback.
If I mute my audio, does it disappear?
Yeah, if you move, yes, it goes. So I think it must be you, David.
Yeah, that was
okay.
That was quite loud. Sorry. I thought you had your Hoover or your washing machine on.
Okay, I'll get going, and I'm quite glad there's a limited number of people in it, actually, because I really do want this to be a discussion and for you to kind of say what you think about these things. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully I'm not going to yes, that one should work, I think. Right. Can you all see that? Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. Right, so I'm going to focus on design because of a whole load of reasons. So I'm just going to kind of go through for, you know, sort of 10-15 minutes and then throw it open for discussion. But David, if you could keep your eye on, if anybody puts their hand up in the meantime, I'll stop and answer questions. I'm not very good at doing two things at once, so I don't always notice that the hand's up. So do let me know. Okay, right, what we're going to talk about then? Well, it's kind of, let's start with kind of, I mean, I sort of feel when I'm talking to occupational therapists that it's that phrase, you know, teaching your grandmother to suck eggs, you know, like how on earth, I'm not an OT, how on earth can I talk about some of these things? I'm an academic and I've come at this from just sort of having an overview of everything really at national and sometimes local level. But I want to kind of step back from, you know, what we do on a kind of day-to-day basis. And I know you're all doing different things, that some of you are, you know, dedicated housing OTs. Some of you may be doing a very mixed job where you're doing all sorts of roles. Some of you are working in the private sector. Most of you, I guess, are working in local authorities. So everybody's got a kind of different role. But if you're working on anything to do with home adaptations, it's working in people's homes. So kind of let's step back and think about what home means to people. And I think there's a very big difference between house and home. And what does home mean? So obviously it's where we spend an inordinate amount of time, and particularly over the last 2 years, more and more of us are spending nearly all of our time at home. So we're kind of in very much the same position as many disabled people, many older people who have always spent a lot of time within their own four walls. So it's a place to kind of do those things like eat, sleep, wash, you know, the kind of functions of life. But it's increasingly now a place to study and to work. And it's a place where we're active in all sorts of ways. You know, we're doing our hobbies, we're doing our gardens, we're doing all sorts of things in a house. It's a place where we welcome friends and relatives. And for many people, it's a haven. It's a place you go in, you lock the door and you feel safe and protected. Some people don't feel that, which is awful. But for many people, that is what it's like. And there's a really strong relationship between people and the place they live. I've got a brilliant book here. It's about 20 years old. It's called The House as a Mirror of Self. And it's a wonderful analysis by a psychotherapist, actually, or psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, about the kind of relationship that people have with their homes. And sometimes for some people, their relationship with their home is stronger than with people. It's stronger than with their partner even. You know, people stay with their home rather than leave their partners. You know, it's an incredibly strong relationship, and it reflects who we are as individuals, isn't it? We put a lot of our kind of emotion and our kind of what makes us ourselves into our home and to designing it. And when we put home adaptations in, those adaptations can often be a reminder of things lost. Sometimes they're a reminder of things gained, you know, when we get it right, when we do it really well. And each adaptation is also an advertisement. And I don't think we often think of it in that way, but it's an advertisement to ourselves as to who we are and what we feel about it and what those issues of loss and gain. But it's also an advertisement to those friends and relatives that come round as to what they think of you and what they think of adaptations. You know, if they see something that looks really naff and medical, it's that ingrained thing in their head that goes, I don't want that in my house. And there's another issue about anything that goes outside the house. There's a really, really kind of awful statistic in a survey that was done on crime, on property crime. And something like 43%, I think, is the figure of property crime is related to the fact that the person was identified as being vulnerable, that they had a ramp or a rail or a key safe or something of the sort outside their house. So advertising is a big issue with adaptations, and I think we don't always think about that when we're doing it. And you're very, very busy, you've got huge workloads, enormous demands on your time, you're dealing with really difficult properties sometimes, and it's hard to think about design, isn't it? And you know, and you're not always encouraged to think about it. I don't think there's space for us to talk about this stuff and to think about it. I mean, I think as OTs, you probably do more than technical officers, because you do at least go to the OT show or, you know, some of the other exhibitions and things which kind of showcase the new stuff and the really kind of cutting edge things. But I think technical officers aren't getting any of that input at all in many cases. So why is good design good? You know, what is it about it that really kind of will help people? Well, if we can remove that stigma, it should encourage more people to come forward earlier. So rather than dealing with cases at crisis point when people's prognosis isn't that good, maybe we can get them really thinking ahead and encouraging people to plan for their later life much more effectively. In the rental stock, it's ensuring more adaptations are approved and fewer are removed at change of tenancy. And that is where I've come into design from, actually, is because that work on the social housing stock, and particularly on housing associations, and knowing that, you know, you guys have been telling me in the surveys that adaptations aren't being approved in all cases. And we certainly know that quite a few are removed, because the proportion of housing association homes that are adapted has actually gone down over the last decade. And yet we've been putting all this investment in. So why on earth has that happened? Well, it must be that stuff's being taken out. And to try and change it, we need a kind of longer term strategic approach to it. So instead of it being just a one-off adaptation for that particular individual to solve their needs right now and maybe for the next few years, you know, what can we do when we're doing an adaptation that will make sure that stays in that property? So when the person leaves, the property is sold, the property is rented to somebody else, that everything stays in place, and we start to make the housing stock more inclusive for everybody. Can we increase the number of adapted properties over time? And I think increasingly now also we need a more circular economy with less waste and much more recycling, and we don't have enough of that. I think from the survey that I did of local authorities, there's only a half of local authorities have a recycling scheme for adaptations, you know, for the equipment, stair lifts and hoists and all that sort of stuff, or for kind of, you know, these kind of, there's a lot of new stuff coming like kind of wash pods and modular extensions, all sorts of things that could potentially be reused. But are we doing that, and are we doing that well? So my big interest is in bathroom design, because that is the biggest component of the DFG. That's where most money gets spent, is on doing bathrooms. So how do we create that feeling of home, that feeling of it's my space, it belongs to me, and it's something that I feel is right for me in bathroom design? And I showed you this slide before, actually, in November, and I know that there was quite a lot of comment about it. And I think that blue square on the left about washing and cleaning our teeth, bathing, showering, etc., that functional stuff is what everybody tends to focus on. And we often forget some of the other stuff. You know, it's like, yes, we're doing all those things on the left, but the stuff in the middle, we're kind of undressing and dressing. Where's the hook to hang things on? Where do we put things? If we're doing our hair in the bathroom, because that's the, putting on our makeup because that's the best mirror and the best lighting, where do we put stuff? The same with shaving, and it's inevitably in flats, it's the place where you wash and dry clothes, because you haven't got anywhere else to put them, and do we think about that? So you end up with your rails that you've put in draped with all sorts of things, inevitably. And it's also, if you've got kids or you've got grandkids, it's a place of play, isn't it? It's where the kids come, sit in the bath, and they've got a load of toys, and there's always also stuff like that around. And then on the right-hand side, I think it's this thing about it being a sanctuary, a place to be alone, to relax, the one space in the house where you can lock the door and you can just retreat and you can chill and you can be away for all the hubbub and all the chaos that's going on in the house. And that is really important. I think it's really important for women. But it's, various members of the family may feel that about the bathroom. It's also a very private place. It's a place you don't really want people seeing what you do if you can possibly avoid it. And then there's all sorts of cultural, religious differences in the way people want to kind of pour water over their body before they do anything else. And, so there's all sorts of things that we need to think about people's background. And then at the bottom is that kind of whole thing about storing stuff, all those things that we could have in the bathroom. Where do they go if they're not in the bathroom and if it's a small house? And if we're making it to a wet room, how do we protect stuff so it doesn't get wet? And if, somebody's got things like they are incontinent, where does that incontinence wear go? Can we get it near the loo somewhere? And the DFG doesn't actually have anything about storage. So there's no reason for you to supply it because it's not in the legislation. But, if you don't supply it, somebody's going to stick a plastic trolley in there or something to put stuff in. So you need to think about where it's going to go. Is there a void space in a wall somewhere that you can actually, could some shelves be put into it? Or, so there's ways that we can think about this stuff. But it's trying to bring it in and think, well, then how do we fit this into these tiny spaces? And I showed you this motion spot picture, which I think is lovely, which sums up everything I've been talking about, of this sanctuary, this beautiful space that you'd feel very calm and collected in and love going in, love having your family go in to use. It doesn't look in the least disabled in any way. It doesn't look in the least bit like it belongs in a hospital. It's a home or a hotel. And everything is dual purpose, like the handrail by the loo is a loo roll holder, the upright for the shower is a handrail, a grab rail rather. There's plenty of storage space. Now it's a big space, it's an expensive refit, it's not what you can do on a DFG, but it's thinking about what that conjures up in your head about how you could emulate that in some way in a smaller space and with a cheaper set of products. And this is what you're dealing with, is these tiny, tiny cluttered bathrooms with just stuff all over the place and awkward layouts, and how on earth you do it. And it is really, really difficult, you know, and you're dealing with this all the time. It's like, why on earth we built houses this way? And we ought to build them bigger, but we don't. And that's the space you've got to deal with. And as again, I showed you a lot of these pictures about, I think we're sort of half getting it right. Like if you take the one in the middle, I think the colouring there is nice. It's warm. It's a really nice environment. But then you put in the half-height screens and the curtains and the white rail and the ugly chair, and it's like, oh, you know, you were on the right lines there. You know, things were good. You know, and then the last bit of finishing, it just goes, oh. And the same with the two either side, the curtains and the grotty chairs. And then the one on the left, on that picture, lovely bathroom here, but why was there a white plastic rail? You know, everything else was looking really good. And even that's got a care shower and it's a really nice screen. But why the white plastic rail? Why did that go in? And it's that just those little bits of attention to detail that we could get better. The one on the right hand side, again, you know, the half-height shower screens and the curtains. And I'm not sure about how, I mean, I still don't know the rationale between half-height shower screens, to be honest. But I know that there's a big debate about that we could be having. And it's what I hope to provide some information on. And just a few more examples. And the other thing is how many cases where we get an electric shower, and I'm not sure why so many electric showers go in when we've got good thermostatic showers now. I know there's issues with water pressure, I know there's issues with scalding, but most, in most cases a thermostatic shower could go in, and that's what you put in your own house rather than an electric one. So why does that happen? And this one I just thought was a bit kind of overpowering. And I think this is where an owner was allowed to choose themselves. And I'm not sure that it worked. Sorry, it's not come out very well when I blew it up. So it's a bit fuzzy. But again, you know, they did some of it really well. And then there's a big white plastic rail in the middle of it. And again, an electric shower and a rather ugly shower seat. So, you know, it's like kind of half doing it and not quite getting it right. Jaquel, I think this is one of your pictures and that picture of how you're trying to change things and putting these slimline seats and the Huey rails and just make it much more minimalist and much more pared down back and will look lovely once people's own things are in there, and a much less kind of intrusive. It looks like an ordinary shower room. And this, oh, sorry, this is another one. This is an AKW shower. And I just want you to look at these two side by side, because I think they're quite interesting. It's exactly the same space, a lot of the same products, but all just slightly different colors, slightly more, you know, the taps have been done in a more modern, tasteful way rather than a hospital style way, taken out that half-height shower screen and put in a full screen, and change the colouring, change the colours of the walls, put wall panelling instead of tiles. And I just wonder what you think about that, you know, like looking at those two and which you would choose and which you think fits the spec better, and whether what
personally,
you would have
I would
in your
choose the
own
one
home.
on the right.
What about anybody else? I don't know whether anyone else wants to.
Yes, the one on the right.
Yeah.
Definitely the one on.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting. They're actually about the same price, but the one on the left gets ordered more often than the one on the right.
The one on the right is the lighting as well, isn't it? It's just a much softer, less harsh. I mean, it's not just the fixtures and fittings, is it? It's a bit of greenery, but down lighters. It is, that's, I think you're right, is that attention to detail that can often be missed, I guess.
But it's very small minor touches that they've done, like changing the lighting.
Absolutely.
But it completely
you
changes
just put
the
in things
feel.
like the grey toilet seat and the slightly tonal floor.
Yeah, that blue, I find it always looks quite harsh now, but it is pretty bog standard, like Sheila's saying, isn't it? But I do think lighting and a bit of biophilia or plants.
Michelle's mentioned in the sorry, Jaquel.
No, that's it.
Michelle's mentioned in the comments that sometimes the full glass screens without some differentiation between the edge contrast can be visually unseen.
Yeah, and you can get manifestations to go on them. You can change that, but it's the concept, I think, of the feel of that bathroom that I wanted to get across. And yes, I think the screens could be better in terms of the visual. Yeah.
Katie's got a question asking whether clients get to choose the floor color themselves.
It depends on the authority. And most will give a choice of colors, but I think there's a sort of misunderstanding about the degree of contrast that there has to be. Yeah. And I think that it's about 30%, isn't it, Jaquel? And I think that often people kind of like go further than that because they think that's safe, you know, and without thinking about the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just having a discussion today on an extra care scheme, and even they were saying, "Oh, not that awful blue." But I wonder if it is that whole thing about, I don't know, blue water. It does. I think it is a bit of a throwback, and this is where, again, if I don't think it's deliberate, is it? It is just that attention to detail and art. Like, you'd like to think the client would have a choice because there is no cost difference in colours, but it's people sort of knowing as well, isn't it? Like, you're right, it's safe to do it because it's safe and they think it ticks a box. So it's not even necessarily deliberately malicious that they're wanting something that looks institutional, but it's almost having permission, something else, isn't it?
I mean, Angie's mentioned that she was barely able to see the white grab rail.
I think the one on the right is actually
on the more clinical
better.
bathroom. Yeah. On the more clinical bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah, the one on the right is much better if it's somebody with visual impairment.
I mean, even with the half-height screens, you can even get ones that are grey and silver, so at least they look a little bit nicer. You know, even if it's a case of the half-height screens are going in, you can get some that look way less clinical.
Yeah, I showed you one back here. That one on the left.
Very similar, very similar to that. Yeah, well, not that very similar to that, but they are sort of still very similar to the plasticky ones, but they're just like a silvery color.
Yeah,
and we did have some questions a little bit further on. Sarah asked, does the reduction in adapted homes take into account when, for example, we remove adaptation when it's a void because the stair lift has come to end its lifetime? For example, if the stair lift might be 10 years old, or is that a
I know that will happen, and that is inevitable. That, you know, and stuff will have worn out and or be unsafe or whatever, and there will be things that get taken out. But I think I haven't got the graph with me, but the number of adaptations in the council stock, the retained council stock, has gone up. It's in the housing association sector that it's gone down. And I think it's, you know, you can probably deduce that it's because the council stock, they're paying for it themselves. It's coming out of the housing revenue account. In the housing association stock, they're using the DFG for a lot of it.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Sheila. I know it's a slight aside from England, but I had a discussion today with an adaptation surveyor from one of the Welsh housing associations, and they've had some instructions, or they've had some changes from Welsh government whereby previously they'd apply for Welsh government for funding and they'd either get granted or not. But now, from what he's telling me, each housing association is being given a pot of funding from that.
Oh, that's changed since I've got a section in the report that says the Welsh.
Well, I haven't seen it in any policy documents, or I've not seen it publicised anywhere. But this is what he said. This is what we were having in a discussion today. So they were looking at, well, they want housing associations to look at more reutilization of their properties. So instead of taking out an adaptation, if a property becomes void, it's about recycling the properties and making sure that you're making use of stuff that's already been paid for.
And that's what's needed.
Because another thing on that is, so I mean, so many times, and I'm sure there's as well, like you go into void properties, and that share seat on the left, so all the white plasticky stuff is rusted off. I mean, I don't know if there's a guarantee with that, but sometimes stuff like say the Huey products which you show for Motion Spot, I mean they have a 25-year guarantee. You know, not only do they look nicer, but in terms of not ripping them out again, and because I know where I worked previously, tenants didn't have a choice. You know, people are like, oh, I don't want a shower, I want a bath, and they were like, well, it's, you know, anyone can use a shower, so it's basically like it or lump it. But you're right, you know, if you feel embarrassed to have friends and family around and you're stuck with that, I mean, you'd like to think if something's a bit better quality, lasts longer and it's less likely to get ripped out. But the difficulty is evidencing that sort of longevity. I mean, most people you speak to agree that makes good sense, but just out of interest, so that the shower seat on the left, do they come with a warranty? You know, it's only since using QE that I'm aware of the. I don't know.
25 years. Actually, now. It would be interesting to find out.
Yeah,
is anybody aware of it?
I'm not aware of a guarantee, but what I think you'll end up with, I get this a lot because obviously I do a lot of voids, a lot of adaptive voids in housing. Work with all the housing associations in Manchester. I think you'll get a lot that'll say it's misused from the tenant and they've not looked after it as well. We get quite a bit of that.
But they do look pretty. Some of them look pretty grim after, you know, like you say, when you're letting them. Yeah.
More than grim.
That's why.
More than grim.
Well, I've just did a quick Google search and says AKW offer, for AKW, for example, AKW offer a lifetime warranty against manufacturing and material defects on all non-electrical catalogued items.
Oh, right. Okay.
And they have a high level of...
I think you'll get into like tyres on cars where it's wear and tear and misuse and they've not cleaned it properly
Yeah,
and then
it's then who get blamed for a lot. I like that.
And it's then who takes responsibility then for chasing up the companies for warranty repairs and all of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that would be a job in itself, wouldn't it? To try and get things.
And the tenant's not going to know that, and you know, the housing association hasn't put it in, so they don't know that, you know.
But I guess if something is generally more robust and better quality and looks nicer, you would hope that future letting would be easier and you're less likely to rip it out. But I guess it's whether people put their money where their mouth is, really.
I think if the bathroom on the right was if I was a social tenant and the bathroom on the right was there, I would happily say yes to that than the bathroom on the left.
But also, I think most of the things we found out. So I know that AKW seat is about, what is it? It's about £400 or £500.
That's not cheap.
And that's what I mean. So Huey's really basic one is about 250, but the one that's a bit more, that has got the ergonomic seat and is height adjustable, that, I mean, they are doing prices for us that are about £600. So, you know, the fact that they are height adjustable in situ, you don't have to have an OT coming along and changing it. When I do, you know, obviously we've got a bit more say in what we want, but it's definitely meeting longer term need. I just think there's a bit of a myth about cost as well, but I mean, I don't deal with adaptations so much, so I assume people do have, and I know Sheila said it before, I guess you have contracts with certain companies, and it's sort of almost, there is a tender or there's a schedule of rates or a particular company that are aligned with a local authority. So it's trying to breakaway. But AKW do that Onyx range. They, there are other and even that on the right. I mean, I'm guessing what's on the right is no more expensive than what's on the left in terms of product.
No, they've told me that they're pretty much the same price.
So yeah.
Well, I think the shower screens themselves are about somewhere. Well, our grants officer in the authority I work in, they kind of allow about £750 for screens and about 400 for a shower seat. And probably about another 400 for a shower.
Okay, because we found the low profile folding shower screens, I think it was about 400 or 500 quid, the ones that fold right back. But I think these are sort of, people are so touchy about price. I think those are the things maybe we do need to talk about and share. I mean, I know it will be different, and I know the different companies are they don't seem to like talking price, do they? But I'm not entirely sure why, because
I think because I've struggled to get prices out of manufacturers, and I think it's because they charge a different amount to each local authority, and they don't want anybody to know what the kind of baseline price is.
Wales, for example, there's an all Wales contract for certain bits of equipment,
but if that understandably, but if that's the first thing, quite rightly, people ask, or you've got a budget to work to, of course you're going to ask how much it is. But if we have ways of demonstrating that you can do it for the equivalent, or if someone's able even to top up by a couple of £100, I'm sure,
You've also got the amount, sorry Sheila, the amount people buy. So consequently, like the HAs might buy X amount, but the local authority might buy loads more, and obviously they're going to get a better price because of the bulk. It's the same with equipment, isn't it? So you've got all them in the background as well, which is why then the aesthetic seems to lose it a little bit, because it all becomes about money and not about the individual. And yes, it meets a need. They both meet needs, but one you prefer over the other because it looks better to the eye.
And things get fossilized as well, don't they? So you've got a schedule of rates, you've got your kind of your framework agreement, and it's everybody's so damn busy that you haven't got time to go back and revisit it and think, actually what we're buying is we could do better here, and it takes somebody quite a lot of time to go out and kind of reprice everything to get the one on the right rather than the one on the left. So, but it's not insurmountable. It's just it's a decision, isn't it? That somebody says, right, you've got some time now, and we're going to make sure that you have that time for the next month, that you work on the prices, and we get a new schedule of rates so that we get a better system for people. And I'd really like to see some research on how well things last, because I think if you give something to put someone that looks lovely, they will look after it. And it's much easier to clean that screen than it is to clean the half-height screen with those great sort of ridges around the doors and things. They're going to get mouldy, aren't they?
The hinges, and the seals at the bottom. Oh, they do. They get incredibly mouldy, and where sometimes when they move, some of the hinges and the screws get rusty. And we're putting it into houses
where people can't clean. They are incapable of bending down, getting on their knees and cleaning them. So we've got to give it.
Another problem with the half-height screens is they drag on the floor. Especially the AKW ones, they don't lift. They haven't got those type of hinges that lift them up and away. And they're very heavy to move. Oh, sorry, Jaquel, we couldn't hear you then.
Oh, sorry. Do you get much back from when you were doing research into half-height doors, that sort of myth about, because actually most people, when you speak to them, they're like, oh, I don't really like, they don't like half-height doors. Was that sort of formalised into anything a bit more robust? Because I think it would be quite helpful to dispel that myth as well.
Yeah, we want that into the design guide, and certainly there's been quite a bit of discussion on the Facebook site, and there was, Paul did a kind of survey, you know, one of those surveys that he does, and got people to say what they would recommend, and some OTs were saying they never recommend them, some were saying that they always do, and then the majority were kind of falling in between. And I've talked to other OTs who prefer not to use them, but to use a different way of protecting the carer. You know, so, you know, you get the carer, you know, with a good full length apron and some, you know, plastic props or something like that, you know.
And Green has mentioned that IMPI do an elevate half height screen, which is which lifts up so it doesn't drag on the floor.
That's one I was thinking of. It's sort of
there's another one I've seen that's got there. I can't remember the company that makes it. There's a lever that you push a lever and it comes up a few centimeters. It pops up and then it just swings freely, and then you release the lever.
Do that. ProCare do that, I think.
Yeah, they're much.
And I don't think they were any more expensive or any more difficult, any more different than the AKW stuff.
I do struggle with the full height doors. I'll throw it out there, mainly because I work in housing associations, so we try and look at aging well in a property. So and whether it's going to meet long-term needs, or even if you haven't got a carer now, or we come to relet it, it means then if that person then needs a carer, and I've been a carer, and we've done them without screens, then they ask for screens, because the carer seems to think that even though you've got to open a door to wash somebody's feet if they're in a wheelchair or chair, it just seems to be this ongoing battle, depending on your carers and how good they are, and what agency they're from, and whether they're a PA, and whether and the half screen height doors just seems to cause us less problems than anything else, to be honest, which is why we do it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do full height. It's just I'm thinking then if you were needing them and you move out, I've potentially got a problem that I've got to pass on to a HA, because I want to let that property, and the letting properties are hard enough as it is.
Can I ask, Sarah, do you, sorry, you know, when you're looking at height screen doors, do you look at the difference between the 900mm height and the 750mm height?
Yeah, but the thing is, I've a lot of the time, I've already got them.
Right, so they're already there.
You know, when I worked in equipment adaptations, yes, I'd be a bit more open, and I do look at that if I do any extra care stuff. But in general, a lot of the stuff is already there. I'm dealing with. It's like I deal with a lot of the bespoke adaptations, which I think I do agree with Sheila there, where we need to try and avoid. I know we need to meet need, but I'll give you an example. I've got a house on an estate that's got steps everywhere around it. So for the wheelchair user to get in this house, it's 3 paths, and the car's miles away, because because what they've done is that person didn't go out very much, if at all. And it's a 3-bed house that's now got a through floor lift in it, which has made it a 2-bed. And the only access to the bathroom is via a bedroom. So in theory, that 3-bed house is now 1-bed need, unless I can create a door. So, and I'm not saying that isn't right. It met that tenant's needs. They probably live there for years very happily. But I then got to pick up the pieces of that is a wheelchair accessible property that involves a wheelchair user parking God knows where and 3 paths, and then they wonder why adaptations get taken out.
But I was going to say, Sarah, then, like, I know when I did a lot of, there were instances where I would just say,
you're very quiet, Raquel.
Oh, sorry, I need to turn it off. What I was going to say is, I mean, there were times where I would say it's not suitable, and you could sometimes end up ripping out the adaptation. It means the family can go there. But it's a difficult one, isn't it? But particularly if somebody lived there for a long time and it was very specific, then But I just think sometimes it's almost like we have to acknowledge that it isn't appropriate.
Yeah,
I think
nobody ever wants the appeal. Sorry.
But if we were starting to think about design in a different way, we'd be going into those properties which had been you know, done a long time ago and thinking, oh, really, we can't relet this. We need to put this into an improvement program, and this needs to be done differently. And I think that there's, I mean, I'm arguing in the Housing Association report that it just needs a much more joined up strategic approach. And at the moment, I think adaptation budgets are being asked to do things they can't do, you know, because they're too small in the Housing Association, and the kind of major improvement work needs to be paying for some of this work to get these properties up to standard. And yet, you know, and we're using the DFG in a very piecemeal fashion on a lot of sheltered schemes and a lot of older people's schemes, where it should be done for all of them. It shouldn't just be, you know, going in and doing a bit of pepper potting. And that's where it's just not joined up properly in some cases. It may not be in yours, but I think in some cases it definitely isn't joined up. Right, shall we move on? Is there anything more that anybody wants to raise about? I mean, we've talked a long time about one set of pictures here, but I think I thought it was an interesting contrast of the same space being done in two different ways. And I'd like more examples of that. So if any of you have got good examples of something that you think, oh, that's what we used to do and that's what we do now, and that looks really good, you know, that's what I'm wanting to see. And particularly if I can get some cost data, because as Jaquel says, that's what we need to show that the costs aren't actually extravagant. They're not any more than you would pay anyway.
Hi, I'm Sheree in Essex. I just wanted to say that regarding costs, in Essex, we don't use the half-height shower doors. We use shower curtains, which is so much cheaper. But the reason we use shower curtains is really for access for carers, and because they can also take it down and pop it in the washing machine to clean it. So for ease of access and for cleaning, when Foundations released their video about get rid of shower curtains, we were outraged because it's a really cheap option and it is an efficient way of keeping the mold and damp in bathrooms down. And if we've got a person that needs assistance of two to get on and off the shower seat, then at least we can get one at the side. But I would love to be able to recommend the bathroom on the right. I just need the justification, or because we can justify colours and contrast and things, and I'm sure we'd be able to justify shower screens if we can get the right piece of kit to that can fold all the way back, so it's not going to stay fixed in that position, it's not going to drag on the floor. It's about getting the right kit. But the difficulty in Essex, we're quite large and we have home improvement agencies in some areas, and other areas like where I am, we go out to independent builders, so they don't necessarily have contracts with AKW, but they know by default Doc M says get something that looks like this, and that's what they go and get. But if we could have design guidelines as a foundation for us to stand on, to say this is what good practice looks like, a shower chair that can be height adjusted in situ, then it'll give us a foundation, I suppose. It's a really hard battle sometimes.
Can I just move on, because I'm going to come to some questions. I'm not going to very many slides actually, so let me just get to the end and then we can just talk. I showed you this one as well, and I think this is I think underpins it all. It's that design is seen as a cost, not an investment, and it's being added at the end rather than being thought about at the beginning, and it's being left to kind of the people at the end of the chain in terms of the kind of responsibility in adaptations teams, and it needs an investment of leadership time. And I think that's really, really important. And that was a study that wasn't about adaptations per se, it was about innovating better for the kind of later life sector. And it was a report by Centre for Ageing Better and UKRI. But I think that this is running through everything to do with the kind of products and the room spaces for older and disabled people, that we need to get better staff, but it's got to be a decision-making process that's done differently from the way it's done at the moment. And that's really what I kind of want to talk to you about. It's kind of where in that process are the decisions made about design, and who makes those decisions, and how much of a role do you as OTs have in actually querying those decisions, actually influencing those decisions, actually being the person responsible for making those decisions? So where does it lie in that process?
I mean, I think, yeah, sorry, I'm aware it's me speaking again. I mean, I think that's where I am very lucky because it is specified.
Jaquel, your sound's coming and going. Can you get a bit closer to your mic or something? Yeah, that's great.
I don't know what it is. But I mean, I think I am lucky specifying it. But that's not to say. So I do set out the justifications for using products such as, because things like the height adjustable seat, the combined shower riser rail, so it cuts down the 25-year warranty. So, and I know Rachel, my colleague, also has looked at updating the OT adaptation specification and improvement agency and including those sort of products. But that's also because they were cost competitive, and she did do a comparison before where I think it was about 50 quid cheaper actually than what was being used elsewhere. But I think this is the thing, like I know I'm sort of saying, oh, you know, but the products are out there, they are cost comparative. It just takes a bit of thought and effort, but I'm aware I'm in a very fortunate position that I can specify, whereas, you know, I'm not governed by schedule of rates or, I mean, obviously I have to show that it is cost effective, but I guess I think that slide before where you talked about sort of Centre for Ageing Better, people who are making those decisions. It's like it's those people that need to get round the table with the OTs so they're aware of what else is out there, because I think it's what status quo, it's safe, it's what people do. And I think it's going to cost a lot more money when it just doesn't have to. And the benefits are just so, like, there's so many benefits for like loads of reasons. It's sort of such a no-brainer. But for me, I think I'm assuming that's what the block is. But because other people on this thingy can probably say better than I can, because I think I'm quite lucky specifying it.
And we've got a hand up from Marnie. Oh,
hi, Marnie.
Hi, Sheila. I think we might have spoken about this at the last discussion thing, but it reminds me that, you know, when you mentioned, you know, that perhaps OTs may have a better awareness of the options of products, and that perhaps the people that you're dealing with in a local authority who are overseeing the installation of adaptations are usually technical officers from home improvement agencies and so on. And I'm just interested in whether there's, you know, if there were more sort of joint training or sort of forums to share all these discussions with those people, you know. I think they go along with, so, you know, I can in my own, you know, if I'm working with a home improvement agency and I get to know the surveyors, and I can remind them that there are other, you know, I can start to have those conversations with individual surveyors, but that's quite a small, you know, way of, and so, yeah, that's what all I'm saying is I wonder if there's something about more broadly, whether there were perhaps through foundations or whatever, that there are forums to share these ideas, because we're not working in isolation, are we, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's the OTs are at the beginning of the process and somebody else is making the decisions near the end of the process. Yeah. How do you think you could get more involved? I mean, has anybody, you know, Jaquel and Marnie, you've talked about it. Has anybody else got any good ideas about things they've done that have really worked to get new designs involved?
Sarah's got a sort of how they manage it, where she's working. She says we get the drawing agreed, but then the bathroom adaptations go out to all different housing associations, and they send us various contracts. So it'd be difficult to educate them all on the design. Also, it was better when we all worked in one office, the technical officers. We could share ideas about new products, but since COVID, we're working from home, all this product sharing gets lost unless it's a piece of equipment or adaptations to meet a specific need. I would probably echo that with Sarah. Certainly my experience working remotely has kind of lessened the learning going in both directions.
Yeah.
And it makes collaboration that much harder, because whereas what was, could be a 30-second conversation across the desk divider, it now becomes a task. Rather than just being part of your normal discourse, it now becomes a specific task that you have to do. So you either have to send somebody an instant message or ring them or sort of do a virtual call. So it becomes more of an additional job to do rather than just a quick, oh, what did you think about this? Or this is the design we've got. Do you think this will work?
One thing we did, and we were doing these updated range, was we got them to come in with products. All home improvement agency surveyors, our design team, and they brought the products and had a look. I mean, it was a bit depressing, very telling. One said, oh, we can't be giving our tenants luxury items, but just at least everybody was able to see and ask the questions, and it was just good. Everybody was around the table. That goes to Sarah's point about when you're all working together, or it is about those connections, isn't it? But I don't, like you said, with COVID, all those sort of joint, those joint working, a lot of that has gone out the window. But I know they say we had it was like a CP session, and they got people to bring along products, a bit like our mini OT show. Like, well, as you just said before, we can go to the OT show, whereas surveyors or officers isn't really. I mean, that's not to say they couldn't go, but they tend to go there, would they? I'm just wondering if that might be a way to get people more engaged.
It's almost it's almost like we need some kind of like online catalog to go, well, this is your standard. This is this is your standard ugly DocM drop-down rail. This is what a QE drop-down rail looks like, or this is what an equivalent product looks like. And just makes a point.
A really nice. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think.
No, please go ahead, Jerry.
It might be a really nice role for foundations to educate the technical officers on, although this is cheap and functional, it can still be cheap and aesthetically pleasing as well, unless we're making the justification that for their mental health we need something aesthetically pleasing. It makes it difficult for us to dictate what should look nice, but it's certainly across Essex. If we have a forum where all of our 12 councils, grants officers, all come together each quarter and have discussions about things like this. What are people doing to share ideas and how to make improvements? And they don't want things to look ugly, but they also need to keep the eye on the purse. So wouldn't it be nice if it was foundations sort of saying, these are two products, same price, which would you choose? Or even the manufacturers to stop making these hideous looking pieces of functional equipment. I don't know if that's maybe going too far.
I don't think so.
That's probably why they are carrying on. That's the thing, isn't it? It's a bit of a self-defeat, and because they're carrying on making them, because people are, if you'd have to sort of boycott them, wouldn't you, to get them to stop. If people stopped buying them, they'd stop making them.
Yeah, AKW, I've talked to a lot about this, and they desperately want people to buy their Onyx range, and if they got more sales, the prices would go down. So they know that there's a lot of opportunity there. But I also heard from some technical officers that actually it's the AKW salespeople that are often, they push the stuff that they think people will buy, which is the blue and the medical looking stuff that everybody's always bought.
Angie makes a good point. Says it's difficult to make changes when we're always told we have to go with the most cost effective option. That will be need, which is usually clinical look and in design. And Jaquel raises an excellent point about having joint CPD sessions and joint information sharing sessions. you know, and again, she's made another excellent point. There are much nicer products out there which are the same price, even cheaper, possibly better quality, and you know, just look more aesthetically pleasing. We've got a question. We've got a raised hand from Jill Pritchard.
Yeah,
Scotland.
I saw Jill. Yes.
No, hello. Oh, hang
Hi.
on. Hello. I'm going to put my camera on. I'm really
Hi.
sorry. I thought we were starting at 7 o'clock, so I've only just joined in the last kind of 20 minutes or so. But it's lovely to be here. Lovely to see Sheila and David. Hi, and that's been really interesting. Hi, everybody. It's been really interesting. Yeah, I suppose a couple of quick things for me. In my experience in Scotland, where this works best is where occupational therapists are embedded in housing associations. Not surprised that I would say that. An example in our link group, which includes a number of associations, Angela Gardner is the inclusive living design team leader. And she's an OT, and so she can absolutely affect the end result. And the other thing that helps with that, and it shouldn't have to be this, but just use it if you've got it, is Linker doing mid-market rent as well. So they're trying to make things better at that end. And then there's economy of scale in terms of just using all that for all your wet floor showers, etc. And just another quick thing, since our accessible housing summit event that we had earlier in the year, where we've got a network group that have had ongoing discussions about actions we can take to just highlight and raise the profile of this whole agenda around making adaptations much more beautiful and mainstreaming them and mainstreaming inclusive design. And one of the things, we don't have a foundations, we don't have a central point that people would kind of refer to for good practice or advice or whatever. And so we're talking about the possibility of setting something up that would be a centre of good practice and sharing lessons learned. And it's a big, people have heard me say this before, it's a big beef of mine. I think we're really bad at sharing when things go well. And somebody said in the chat about, there's lots of examples where things don't cost that much more. The cost difference is not huge, but can make such a huge impact in terms of how things look and how long they last, etc. So yeah, a couple of quick things there.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good point, Jill, about not having sort of a body like foundations. Wales is very similar. We've got Care and Repair Wales, but it's not.
We've got Care and Repair Scotland, but no, I know. So you're very lucky. We look at you and envy the fact you've got that organisation kind of bringing things together. But so I suppose for us, if we are going to try and put something together in terms of a national good practice centre somehow, it'd be really good to learn from all of you guys about what are the good things about your experience of foundations and what could be better, I suppose, you know. But that's for another conversation. But
I know we're kind of coming to the end. We're finishing at 7:30, aren't we?
Sorry.
Is it right?
There or thereabouts. If anybody wants to stay on, by all means. But
I just wanted to mention this. I mean, I've been kind of working on this, as Jaquel and Marnie know, for quite a long time, because it's come out the housing association work I've been doing. It's just, how do we kind of get a different approach, and how do we improve design to stop things getting taken out, to stop people being refused adaptations. That again is also probably what worries me most, is that people are refused adaptations because nobody wants to put a grotty shower into a general needs property. They want to keep the bath in there because it's better. So that's where it came from, and then that's why we got involved in it. And I've been talking to Jaquel and Marnie for quite a long time about how we actually put this into practice as some kind of design guide. And we were originally talking about kind of having some kind of report that was about design, but then I said that's not good enough. You know, these days we've got to have something that's online and that can be refreshed, you know, because things will change and we'll get new products in, and we don't, you know, we don't quite know what people want at the moment. So we've got to have to put things up, and you'll go, oh, can we have this instead? Or, you know, can we add to this? So what we're in the process of doing is setting up this online resource, and Foundations has now decided that rather than it being a standalone website, it's going to be part of the Foundations website. Foundations has actually got a brand new website. So if you've not looked at it lately, do go and have a look at it. And they've got a really good web design company now that's very much better on the kind of accessibility of the website, so that everybody, you know, no matter what their impairments, can use it. And so we're going to have this section on design. There is a bit of there is a section there at the moment. It's got sort of 3 or 4 things. It's got extensions and showers and ramps and something else. But it's actually, I think it's Paul Smith's thesis that's in there, because he's just sort of filled the space with some stuff. But we've, Rachel Russell and I have kind of been trying to sort of think about what would go into that website. And we've got a meeting with Jaquel, Marnie and 1 or 2 other people on Monday to try and take it forward as well. But it's going to sit here, and we hope that we'll get some stuff up relatively soon on some aspects of it. And I'm not going to show you the kind of website layout at the moment, because it may well change, but we want to do something on how you do a design brief, actually how you kind of put design into what you're recommending, so that you can try and influence it that way, and how you can justify it. What's the rationale behind everything? And then we're going to look at different room elements, you know, so say to look at bathrooms, but then to look at the different parts of the bathroom and how you get the rationale, you know, like we've been talking about half height screens. We've been, you know, talking again about, you know, full height screens versus curtains, and how can you justify it? So what would be the arguments? But it's going to be hard, and we know it's hard to do, because we've got to be very punchy, very few words, you know, because the website can't be lengthy stuff, but trying to get the right information across and give people permission, I think, as much as anything. It's not just about the knowledge and the costs and getting these comparisons, but giving people permission to do things a bit differently. So it's going to be a work in progress for some time, I think.
There's just 1 or 2 more comments. Helena has said that she started to send specs and product quotes with her referrals, and that's introduced her grants officers she works with to other products, and she had no sort of backlash.
Great.
And like this.
That's good. Thank you, Helena.
And they're more interested to explore things like that themselves. Also, Michelle mentioned, is it something that the special section could help out with? And I have been included in that meeting, as well as, yeah, I think Jaquel and Marnie are also attending. So it's kind of formulating how best we can help you, whether it's publicizing, whether it's helping with funding, whether it's trying to get people involved.
I think it's information. I think it's the information that, you know, it's those product ranges that you think,
yeah, it's getting that
really,
best practice,
really good. Yeah, that's what we need, is what you would actually be able to use, but you think actually it looks good, it meets, you know, if we did some kind of value for money exercise on this, it would come out well, not just in terms of the actual upfront cost, but the long-term cost, because it's got this 25-year guarantee or whatever, you know. So I think it's I think that we need the information.
I think that's a good point. It's just giving people the information as well. Like, so it was basic specification.
Yeah, Jaquel, your sound keeps going. We are only catching a few words.
Sorry, I don't know what it is, but I think it's just giving people the information. So we changed some of the details on the standard shower spec for adaptations, the product, and because often it is just knowing what is out there. It's not that people don't necessarily want to provide it, but it's just giving people the information, and the, almost like I think what you said as well, the permission to use something else.
Mm.
And it's raising that awareness, isn't it, that there is something else that does the same job. Just because you've been using the same type of drop-down rail or the same type of grab rail for the last X knows how many years, doesn't mean to say that there's not another product out there that one looks better, has the same functionality, or even may have better functionality. I mean, like the, for example, in I think some of the pictures that Jaquel shared with you, where you've got the shower riser rail and the grab rail all in one. That looks much smarter than a separate riser rail, a separate shower, you know, and it kind of makes things look much
neater,
much nicer, much neater. And I agree with your point as well, Sheila, on sort of this notion of electric showers. It is something that grants officers seem to have a love for electric showers and not so much for mains activated showers.
And I don't know what I've got a list here of the things that keep coming up and this is where the kind of rationale is needed. It's this curtains and screens, the half height screens and the movable screens versus no screens. It's what sort of rails and can we have a sort of, you know, a standard positioning of a rail in a house where somebody hasn't got really specific complex needs. Rimless toilets versus rimless toilets, a new thing which is much easier to clean, you know, so could we put those in, you know, what height should the toilet be? Can we give people some advice on that? We might do something separate on wash dry toilets, because there's questions about which one of those people would use in which circumstances. Wallboards versus tiles, I think, is another issue that keeps coming up. The whole thing about these sort of bathroom for life things of the shower tray underneath the bath, and is the shower tray too narrow? Is it actually not fit for purpose? And how do we get around that? And I know, Jaquel, you've got a lot on that, but you know, we do need to make sure that that information's there. The thermostatic versus the electric. Shower pods, I know that people are starting to use those more. Which ones are good? Which, you know, can we recommend some? And then, you know, that how do we interweave the stuff about dementia and sight loss into everything? I don't want it to be a standalone section. It should be there in everything that we do, so that it's not, you know, we're doing some kind of specialist bathroom for somebody with dementia.
Well, all of this should be really. It should be the inclusive design approach where anybody can use it, regardless of whether there's a function, whether they've got a functional issue or a problem with cognition. To somebody who's completely able-bodied, it should be a case of, well, you walk in and just use it.
Anybody can use it. Yeah. And that's what we need to try and achieve.
So you're moving away from it being a disabled adaptation to it just being, well, it's a bathroom that anybody could use.
Just a bathroom, And this thing about water leakages, I go on about it a lot, because I know that it's a big issue with housing associations and social housing and the private rented sector. That's the one thing that they want to avoid at all costs. And we've got to make sure we do things right, because adaptations will be refused in general needs above ground floor if we don't. So we've got to get that one right. So it's trying to deal with all of those. And if you can think of anything else that needs to go in there, let me know. But I think they're kind of some of the key issues where it's not clear cut what you should do, and therefore what's the rationale for deciding on one thing rather than another.
Marnie's mentioned in the chat, Sheila, that lighting in general, sort of less specific to sort of a sensory impairment.
Yeah, but as I say, that should go through everything. You know, the whole colour contrast for lighting and all of that sort of stuff. It shouldn't be a specialist issue. It should be.
I think the one thing that you mentioned the one thing that you mentioned that was quite important that's not on this particular list is storage.
Yes. Yeah, I'll put that in again. Right, I'm just wanting to finish off really, because I know that you all got homes to go to, if you're not there already. So these are my ideas about trying to get change. You know, it's making that business case, you know, and getting, you know, the bathroom spec at the moment, and then costing out another spec and going, right, could we do it this way? Because it's not going to cost any more. It's going to cost very little more, and it give us a better result. And it's working together, which I hope that we are doing now as a result of this group, and as you know, as a result of the work that we're going to do with the slightly smaller group next week and beyond. It's getting to the people who make the procurement decisions. It's the subtly educating them often, you know. And if you do go to the OT show next year, this year, take them with you, you know. Make sure that you book 2 tickets and take them along. or you go to NADEX or whatever it is that you think is worth going to. And the same with your senior managers, take somebody with you. And if you can't get anywhere with your immediate kind of management group or co-workers, then go to your elected members, because they love this stuff and they'd love to be involved in developing new things that would do their own electorate good. The other thing is to work with the manufacturers. They would all love you guys to go up to their showrooms and go and talk with them. They would love it. Yeah, what do you really want? Why are people ordering these horrible medical looking things still? And how can we get them to stop it? And you know, let's talk it through. And so go there. You know, IMPI and AKW would welcome you with open arms, but so would all the others. And I know that NRS, who are one of the main 3 suppliers of equipment for the community equipment budget, they are trying to develop a new range. They want to develop a range for the private sector, actually, because they know that there's this later life market that they need to cater for, and they want your input. You know, and they would do something like Huey. Probably, you know, could they get it cheaper? I don't know. It's all coming in from China, most of it. But, you know, they have access to an enormous market through the ISIS budget. So, you know, talk to them. And then it's working in partnership to try and get the volume discounts. And that's really with housing associations and local authorities working together. I mean, some of the big housing associations, I mean, they could really drive the prices down if they got behind this. And they've got bigger spending power than the local authorities have if they decided to really go with this. So they were my ideas about how you could do it. Right, I think that's me talked out, and I'm really glad to get all of your comments and any, you know, I've given my email somewhere back here. Don't know where it was. There was there. Right. Okay. So that's my consultancy email. So, you know, drop me a line or keep that. And if you come across something good, then send it to me. And certainly anybody who thinks they're getting design right or has got these comparative pictures of kind of something that will cost the same, but is much, much better. I'd love to get that, you know, anything that you've got that would give us that sort of comparison, I would love to have. So, you know, if you get it, just send it to me.
Sheila, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And thank you very much to everybody else who signed up and come along. Just to let you know, shameless plug, our next webinar is on the 9th of March. There's not a particular scheduled topic. It's more of a sort of an open drop-in session where we can just sort of have a discussion about any particular burning issues or anything that sort of more or less to sort of use it as a forum to share good practice, or even use it as sort of a case discussion type forum, so you can get different perspectives from, hopefully from just outside your authority, but from different parts of the country where practice may be slightly different, or things are done in a different way or done in a new way. So thank you very much, everybody. And again, thank you very much, Sheila, for giving us your time this evening. So hopefully the recording will make it available via our newsletter. So if you have got any colleagues who have missed this evening or couldn't come, and they're housing members, then that will be shared in our next newsletter.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, everybody.
Good
night.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Always thought-provoking. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.